So, Ryan, it's good to see you again.
Likewise, Ethan. Always a pleasure.
I've noticed I clap a whole lot, but I've noticed other podcasters do that too. I'm just enthusiastic. We'll just have to live with
I feel like that's just a clap sync right there, isn't it?
it. So, extra excited. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we did our episode for the year end 2023. Looking forward to 2024. And also, another thing really big happened that requires its own special episode is after a year of recording together and 6 months of recording on actual professional microphones and storing it, we have published our podcast.
Amazing. I can't believe it's been a year. My goodness, where's the time gone?
Pretty fun time spent. And
it has been.
I'm glad we did that episode last week because looking back of where we were a year ago, January, to where we are this year, January, just night and day different in so many ways.
I mean, we started out recording on the cell phone in a bar.
Yes.
Actually, I think we went to 2 bars that day.
And it's tragic because listening through those like really good conversations. But like it's so annoying to listen to the trash sound that there's no way it would be useful to anyone else.
It's fun to have it anyways.
So this is a big deal. I'm really excited about this. I want to talk about the things that went into it. As we've talked about with other pieces of content, it's so important to pick what you're doing. And even if you don't show it to anyone else, make the complete thing from A to Z. Because there's so many small things that come in there that you didn't know were required, that you're going to need to learn how to do. Or when we get into systematizing, learn how to do really quickly and effortlessly so it doesn't drag your speed and your morale down. And from doing all of this last step of turning it from what I felt was really quality conversations into an actual published podcast, there was a big chunk of things that took a couple of weeks for me to get done.
Again, very appreciative of you going out of your way, taking the time to make show notes, all that. Just bravo. I applaud your effort.
Thanks, man. Some parts were fun, some parts were hard, but it all came together. I personally, I don't want to exaggerate for anyone else, but I feel super proud of this. Whatever anyone else thinks or anyone else feels or whatever happens in the future, it feels to me going from after 12 months of working on this stuff and spending so much time and so much money on courses to learn and everything, I only had maybe 5 minutes of content that anyone could point at and say, well, you're working on this. How do I tell you're actually doing this and not just making it up? I had about 5 minutes of drone videos. And now, instantly, well, not instantly, it was like blood, sweat, and tears getting this done. But within the space of a couple of weeks, going from only 5 minutes, we have now 18 hours of solid content with deep, meaningful stuff inside it and a fairly decent wrapper around it. I added some extra production stuff to make it feel like a real produced thing, something that someone that cares about it put the work into, and also somebody that actually spent the time to learn these techniques knows how. So you will notice that I put together an intro, a little bit of editing, and an ending for each of the episodes we have, and some other things. And each one of those, I feel it just immediately gives you the impression of okay, these people learned, these people cared, these people tried. And I feel that's even more important with our podcast because the very point was we did something special that I'm also proud of. We took the courage to start recording this before we were good at it. So we could record that whole progress of, hey, this is what it'd be like for you. Like when you were just starting out, this might be a stage that you pass feeling like you're not good enough or you're not ready enough or you're just don't want to show that to the world yet. We have that recorded. You could see this is where we were, and we could see that progression of getting better and better and better. And that kept on going.
I mean, hopefully it inspires people, keeps them driven and motivated to see no one's going to be amazing at this right out the gate. That's just not going to happen. You have to work, you have to learn, you have to make mistakes.
And Lord, did we make a lot. The first 5 episodes, each were basically named after which mistake we made, wildly drastic mistake we made. which is again what I'm getting to is why I'm so glad to do the production stuff around it. It's like, okay, I trust these people care. I trust they know. They trust it. And then it starts off and there's the camera's broken or the sounds come like only one side. And like, this is crap. Like, it's crap on purpose. This is when we were figured out. Check out next episode when we figure that exact problem out.
Honestly, you should just start editing in at the end of those episodes. And next episode, we're fixing the sound quality or something like that.
That's exactly what I did. There was 2 episodes. One when we completely botched up the sound, and one when we completely botched up the video. The first time we tried each of these, and I saw this as another opportunity. If I can take the time, I could learn that technique where I saw people like will put text over what's going on, and with the right wit and timing and everything, it's humorous. It's fun. It almost adds to the experience. The best is if you look at what I've uploaded now, it's the trailer for episode 5. That's the one where we first get video, and we're just filming on my iPhone, connecting my laptop, and nothing. You know the result. We did not get video from that episode. And so it starts off with talking and like, hello, this is our first episode with video, and like pops up asterisk. The video did not work. It is totally Ethan's fault. It just keeps on going as we sound more confident. It's like, nope.
Oh, that's fantastic. I definitely not only your fault. I can't even remember what mistake we made, but my goodness, it's been a fun learning curve.
Let's go ahead and see if we can pull that up. It's, what? It's 90 seconds long. We could see if we could try out our screen sharing technique that we got going on now.
Hopefully this one works first try.
Yeah. Let me know when you start hearing stuff, but I'm going to get through this.
While you're working on that, gonna break the fourth wall here a little bit. It's International Scotch Day for us. What are you drinking today? Looks like a Connemara?
Yeah, so I appreciate you let me know what these things. I don't have any scotch. That's a horrible thing. You got to teach me.
I might have to fix that.
Some great Spirit of Season 2 episodes about scotch might get me to buy some. But
there's going to be a couple, I think.
The closest thing I have to that is this Irish whiskey, Connemara. It's peated, so it's pretty similar.
I'm familiar with them. They're a fun, interesting brand. Have you tried that one yet?
Yeah, it's one of the things I keep in that online tasting that I'm putting together because it has such a subtle peatiness that for even people like me, it's enjoyable. I can see why peat would be an enjoyable flavor instead of just being blown out of the water and never wanting to try more.
I always tell people Connemara to me is more ashy than smoky comparatively for peat smoke.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor. All right, let's get into the whiskey stuff near to the end so we can keep the topics compartmentalized. That's really been helping with the tempo of the podcasts. But what do you have?
I am drinking a little bit of Highland Park of Valkyrie.
Oh, that's a pretty bottle. I love seeing that. Thank you. Okay. This should be working. You see it okay?
Looks great to me.
Okay, hopefully you can hear it too. So pay attention to the attempts we've made. All right, Ryan, we got video today.
All right, very excited. Brand new world for me.
We had a whole 20-minute segment of it just recording us figuring out how to connect all this shit.
Yeah, that sounds par for the course.
Well, as this is going to be your last one in person here in Tennessee, I'm glad we have proof you exist.
I almost wish I was more of an urban legend instead. I just had to wish that.
Similarly, the episode the first time we actually record on 2 tracks so we could start correcting the echoing and balancing out our volume things. Didn't sound perfect, but it was working. And then you get to like the end of the episode, and it doesn't end with, well, that was great, we'll talk later. It ends with Ryan like, oh, I have an idea, I want to try something.
Oh, that's perfect. I'm starting to feel like I've got one of those old school style genies where it twists your words to give you what you said you want, but it's not at all what you actually wanted.
Well, we signed up for learning, and believe me, every step of the way, this has pounded us to every mistake possible, which was the fastest way to learn.
Here's to mistakes.
To mistakes. So I want to go down the list of things that went into getting into published. All right. So first of all, was getting the videos actually to the final complete state. You have some pretty good recording, audio quality is good. It feels like you're done, but there was a lot more that went into it. First, I had to think of a name. We have to publish it under something. And this kind of goes into the description where you have that pyramid where the body of your text or your video is kind of least important. The ending is really important. And the beginning and the hook is the most important part. It's the first thing that people see. It's the first thing they decide that if you want to give it a chance and see if the next 5 seconds would make it worth investigating. So the name also really had to matter a lot too. It's common wisdom to just pick something and roll with it so you don't get stuck for too long. It felt to me that this is kind of like getting the background music for your video, where it sets the tone and kind of changes how you edit the video and what else you do. It changes the direction you're going to do for everything else. So it felt really important for me to do this. And after grappling with it for about 10 days, which is why this got a little delayed in January, finally came up with the name Foundations of Creation.
Perfect description for us.
I like it. Like, it's very basic. There's so much stuff for taking people for our advanced or intermediate. I think it's really rare to do what we did, where we actually are recording this while we're still so new that we're breaking things and being willing to show that part of ourselves to the world. Once I had that, go ahead.
It's such a simple concept, and yet I can't think of anyone that I know who's done it. At least I haven't ever gone back far enough in their catalog to see them make those mistakes.
Yeah. So once I had that, everything else started moving. It feels to me from this experience that true creation kind of goes like through waves, where we talk a lot about how you get the stress and the struggle of indecision of what's the right choice, what's the wrong choice, and you're kind of stuck. And how to get with that, the burnout that comes from that. And I feel that is, I'm realizing is naturally natural and okay, because you kind of are naturally going to go and get stuck. And then you get that thing, and then the rest starts flowing out from it. It feels now that that's the way it's supposed to be. Because once I had the name, bam, it seemed easy to come up with the idea for the icon. In my mind, this whole foundation of creation, I didn't want it to be this very like brutish industrial thing. I wanted it to be kind of warm and friendly. We're just kind of like starting from the ground up. So I had in my mind, like, a crane, pulling this out of the foundations of the earth. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is definitely true, too. But if you just see a crane holding all the instruments, it kind of looks like, oh, this is for experts or technical people or people, in Hollywood with like little cranes. Like, no, like I feel like if you actually see the motion of it pulling it out through the ground, it seems a little bit more cartoonish, and it's like a garden and that kind of vibe. So I really wanted to also take the time to animate it.
Bravo, animation is not easy.
And I learned a lot from that process too. The course I went through, the 14-day filmmaker course, had a spot where the guy says, like, hey, I know this isn't exactly mandatory and it's a little bit of detour from the main topic, but I really love this. This makes a big impact. It's really added to the emotional kick of everything we made. So I want to take the time to teach it to you. And he taught a section on how to animate company logos. And in his logo, it was something that was, top down. So everything is separated in a shape, and you could just go into Photoshop and slice them off and then make them act independently when you're animating them.
Ah,
And I struggled that with a little bit with the Irish Spirit socials because the two whiskey glasses were overlapping and I had to try to cut and duplicate. And so I got starting on it, and that course, it gave me a good head start. But I figured there's got to be a better way. I'm animating this in After Effects. It comes along with the suite, so it's already there. I don't have to pay any extra more money since I already have it.
perfect.
But I create the logo in Photoshop, and After Effects is part of the same suite. So could they connect some way? Looked it up, and yes, they can. If you take the time to actually make it in Photoshop, you have everything in different layers. So when you get into After Effects, I can easily say, hey, this layer do this, that layer do that way. You can nest it just like you do with nesting in Premiere or DaVinci. So you have these grouped objects where, you have the basket of the microphone and the camera. Like, okay, you guys are just going to come up together. I only have to tell you as one object now.
That's brilliant, easy.
Mm.
I've worked with trying to animate before, and I don't have nice programs because I didn't want to pay money for something I wasn't sure I was going to use at the time.
Mm.
So I was basically hand drawing every frame and treating it like a claymation.
Hmm.
God, does that suck. Do not do that.
What were you doing that on? What was the animation?
I'll see if I can find it and add it to the share. I know it's on my phone somewhere and I can email it to myself then. But
Hmm.
trying to find it is going to be fun.
You can
Let's
work on
see.
that. At the end of this episode, we're going to come back to what our general skill sets are, and that'll be a perfect time to transition back to that.
Sounds good. I'll see if I can find it, but if not, not a big deal. Just know, do not hand draw every frame. Just don't. There's
Yeah.
better ways.
There's great tools out there for doing things so that we can use them. This, it was still a lot of agony to figure out could it be done and then learn how to do it and then do it for the first time. But we're finally getting to this point now where we're returning to skills that we've learned before. I think this is supposed to be the arc of learning content creation. Everything's difficult and takes forever the first time, and it feels overwhelming and like you're not really getting anywhere. But after you get through that, you're done. You have these skill sets, and you go back to it again, and it's not going to be as fast as a professional, but it's going to be 10 times faster, and you can get a lot of things in. And when I was getting through this, it was starting to build up that momentum where the next step was something was more familiar to me than the last step, and started getting to it was more about the creative process, the artistic decision making, and what would be exciting, and feeling like what connects with the audience and what represents Ryan and represents me, instead of just how do I get this button to change this thing.
It's really fun once you get that flip switch from how do I just make something work to how do I actually represent and use the artistic ability. I don't need to worry about the tools. I know how to use a hammer. I know what it's used for.
Mm,
I know how to do things. It's just how do I get what I want?
yes. You get into what do I want to do?
That is a lot more fun.
And so this is just like multiple layers of that whole iceberg metaphor. I'm trying to find a better metaphor for it because it comes up so often. But, with my creation for the past 12 months, I've been working a lot, putting in money and time and a lot, and it doesn't look like anything's coming out. And then it's just kind of like building that stuff underneath the surface where no one can see it, but a whole lot is being built, a whole lot's coming up. And now, ta-da, getting the spot where it pops up and suddenly, bam, you know, 11 episodes of podcasts published
Amazing.
with the skill set, exact same thing. Sitting there like, man, everything we do, it takes forever. It's super hard. This is how it is forever. This is miserable. I'm just not going to be good at this. And then getting to, oh, we've kind of covered all the basics. And now each thing we hit, bam, Like the skills that we've been putting together have been hiding under the surface, just being built and built up. And now just that one extra little inch, we didn't change who we are. We didn't magically become massively more productive or smarter over the last month, but the amount of skill that is visible to others now, completely different.
And I mean, even just the way we're talking, how we're communicating our message, the more we do this, the better we're going to get at every single part of this process.
Mm-hmm. So
Even what we don't think of as skills, we're going to get better at, and it's going to surprise us.
Yes. I was taking a little bit thinking of what I want to go on to next. And I think that the speaking is going to be the most important part. We needed to get the video. We needed to get the editing, all these other things. I wouldn't have been able to make the animation or the background music if I hadn't done that first. But that's not the most heavily leveraged part. So those skills I feel can kind of just sit there, and they're as good as we'll ever need for probably years. And the biggest lever comes back to the most important thing, the thing that got both of us started, the speaking.
Speaking of speaking, you helped me out with a project earlier and got to listen to that.
Mm. The Takasuru lines?
That's right. Well done.
It was fun to practice that.
Honestly, it sounded really professional, great pacing, man. Just honestly, I was tempted to say I should just send you some scripts and you read off an episode and record it because you sounded better than I do.
I think you like variety a lot because the stuff you read, it's really, really good. And I know this is going to hurt for me to say this, but I love intensity. And the primary cornerstone of this expensive speaking class I've taken is how to be even more dynamic in every range. But now I see how much impact that calm, understated, but sincere way you deliver your podcast. There's something there that I got to learn someday.
I think you were damn close to it with the lines you recorded. Again, very well done. Amazing job at them. I'm not sure if it's me being hard on myself or if I just hate the sound of my own voice, but I was, again, seriously considering just sending you a script and saying, go nuts.
I would love to work more on this stuff together. But before I even put a period on that sentence, your stuff is great. I love listening to it. This is a separate thing that I started to notice too, that there's like 3 steps. First is you sort of learn how to do like either the speaking or the video making. And then the second step is actually do enough of it that you get used to what you've actually created. In the beginning, it's just so foreign to you that you hate your own voice. You hate your way you look. You hate the way you lead your own camera movements. And that's just a natural thing because you're foreign to it. It has nothing to do with how good it was. You need hours in it. And then after that, it gets into the mastery stage where, yeah, I see the actual level of quality for what it is. And now I can start working on polishing it. For your podcast, you're like making diamonds, man. You put so much time into making a few things. You don't get a lot of time listening to it.
It's very flattering when you put it that way. You could also put it as, I take so much damn time between episodes that I don't have time to get used to my voice. And I'll go back and listen to a recording and say, oh, this one's garbage. I need to re-record it 3 different times.
Exactly what we're talking about. In a lot of ways, this is kind of similar to the Irish Spirit Socials project I did, where it was too big of a thing for me to learn efficiently. In the beginning, you need to do a lot of small things. And you're also ambitious and doing this out of passion. So you're doing something very large. It's great. But in the beginning, we should try to find as many of those small pots to make a lot of. I would ask if you can think of something in addition to what you're doing that's small that we could do a whole lot of.
Well, I want to start doing some small, quick episodes, just as like minute, 2 minute long recording, and put those online.
Mm, that would be perfect.
I think I can come up with some projects for us then.
Would love it. And for this, the lines you gave me, they were perfect because they had stuff that's meaningful enough for me that I care about it, that I can actually think of something to do with the lines. When I was doing that, I was like immediately getting excited. Like, man, I just got to get this podcast stuff up and running smooth because I'm excited about this and I can see 12 different things that I could add to it. And I want to practice so I can actually add all 12 of those things at the same time and really give the best thing possible that I can give to those lines that you can use for them. And it's also good experience for me developing my skill. It has to be the same thing for you. Like there's things that we could do that are of that size, 3 paragraphs long that we work together. I would also deeply love working on those speaking skills with you. That would make me learn better, and it's fun to see you grow. And like I like working with you.
Hey, likewise, let's absolutely do it. Anytime you've got something you need me to read off, please, let's make it happen.
Okay, so that's one thing we're gonna put on the list. When we get to the end of the episode, there's a couple things that I want us to look forward to adding to our episodes that I think we're both going to be excited about having. But wrapping up this, there was the name, the icon, the animation, and that was the background music. Similar to the name, it kind of sets the tone of what you're going to do next. It's a very critical decision that changes a lot. I spent a lot of time picking out the background music for that silly little 3-second intro. And I think it makes a big difference. And I'm glad I spent the time to do that. I'm starting to think that picking background music itself is a skill that you can build over time. Like, maybe just to give a simple example, small tasks, a lot of small pots, go on Instagram. This is what I've been doing. Look through stuff. You find a clip you like that has a song you like, you can save that. And then go, okay, next time I want to make some kind of meme or some kind of promotion or advertisement for anything that I want, pick from that library of songs and use that as your starting point instead of, well, I want to make a video about this. What could I do to support that? I got this song. Like, okay, that mood. Like, what in the realm of things I love would fit that move, and then create something on top of that. I think that'll start building rapidly since it's really small increments and small loops of, oh, I do have this big topic. I need music to fit it. Oh, I have a sense of what that mood was. If I don't have an existing song that I already know from my practice, I immediately, though, know what tone of song and how to describe it. I could explain it to someone. I want something sort of like this. And that will rapidly speed up the whole process.
So, a little bit about my podcast, because I have to use background music frequently and have dealt with this more than I would ever like to.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the stories that I have when I'm writing them and picking out a good one for the podcast, in my head I'm thinking, okay, this one's going to be this style of movie. So for Shackleton, I was thinking, okay, think like National Geographic, Discovery, going over landscapes, that vibrant, energizing music of look at this beautiful landscape in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
John Shaw, I'm thinking, okay, spaghetti westerns, Clint Eastwood, some guys sitting on the corner with a banjo and a guitar. Whenever I'm doing one of these stories and I'm writing it, I'm trying to think, okay, what style of movie would this be? And what type of music would you typically see in it? Makes my job easier, and it sets expectations because other people have seen those genres of movies, TV shows, what have you, and they'll recognize, oh, this is similar. I know what to expect now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little bit like color theory, where part of it's actually primitive, attached to your instincts, and part of it's just, this is what we associated with art we've seen before, and it immediately triggers that expectation.
It's all pattern recognition. That being said, if I do any more projects, I am not going to limit myself to try and do period style music or anything, because that is awful. Do not do it. Oh my god, it's a headache.
You couldn't find the
There's
right version of Yankee Doodle?
so I eventually found one that I liked. It was owned by the US military.
Mm.
And so I actually reached out to my sister who's in law school and had her give me she was very clear, unofficial advice, no way legal counsel whatsoever because she hasn't passed any bar or anything, so she could get in trouble. But she said, you're probably fine to use it. So I'm using that version of Yankee Doodle, and it's just such a headache. I should have absolutely just said, yeah, I'm going to use modern music for everything. It's going to be a modern retelling of these stories. Because there's a ton of modern music, because that's what everyone hears and what everyone makes.
Yeah, yeah.
There's so much more of that than anything like trying to find something 1920s sounding. There's going to be 5, if that. That's copyright free and good quality.
I'm torn on this because on one hand, so much of whiskey stories, it's about the past and usually old past. And this is also something that you add and do. It's difficult because no one else is doing it, which is exactly why it makes it so valuable. And as I've been saying from the beginning, important to have done, which is why I think it's just not fun, but it's actually culturally relevant that you're making this stuff. The other
Yeah,
hand,
you
you got
give
to
me too
balance your
much
time.
credit. The
You know, we
time
don't want to
management, sorry.
we don't want to dive off the cliff of the whole 80-20 thing where it's great, but if it's going to take, it's going to triple the amount of time it takes for you to get the podcast out, but only doubles the amount of joy. Well, that's not a good trade-off. 3 for 2.
Yeah, I sink too much time into it. I'll readily admit that. But it's something that I think is really important and sets the tone, especially early on. You want that first music to be exactly right.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's worth it to me, and it would bug me if I don't get it right to the point where I will spend more time on it.
Maybe there's something I could help a little bit because on one hand, every genre you do, every period you do is going to be completely new. So you're kind of starting from scratch. But eventually you're going to get to a point where you sort of collected a repertoire, a portfolio that'll cover most things you need. And we've seen this with all the other art we've done, where the first
Oh,
is
I'm getting
so
there.
hard. And then after that, you can produce a whole lot, but it's high quality because you have all this. And, there's a couple places I was able to poke at and find, and, we could work on this together a little bit.
It absolutely is going to get easier, and there's some periods where I'm repeating and I'm going to use the same music again.
Yeah.
But it's just such a headache. I wish I'd said just modern music, throw in some heavy drums to build suspense, everything. That even modern movies that are showing like historical events will use more modern sounding music because
Mm.
there's so much. It's so much easier to get that.
Yeah.
It's
And
well.
like we keep on saying, we're not going for recreating the experience. We're going for recreating the feeling that you had.
That's exactly right. And modern music will give you that same feeling, and you'll get a lot more options in a lot less time.
If you find the right tone, that's everything, man.
I might say screw it in season 3. I'm just telling all modern stories.
I think like big picture, that's a great idea. You should intentionally pick things that are going to be easy before you go back to something hard. You learn more from the small loops, like the easy pots, the pottery.
Right.
And if there's a topic you can do that's going to be easy for you, knock some of those out. You're going to gain a ton of skill from those. And in my opinion, we actually probably learn more from those. And then when you go back to the stuff that's hard, it'll be so much easier from all the extra skill that you've built up doing that.
That's true. I'm going to tell you another trick, though. Finding good stories that are, let's say, 10 years old, a lot harder than finding one that's from 1920.
Mm-hmm.
All the bad stories from 1920 have died. No one's telling them anymore. Only the good ones are left.
Yes. That's what they
There's a
say about
lot
music
less
too.
garbage to shine through looking for.
Yeah. Well, let's sit down and talk about that. In between the week.
Sorry, I've got you off the rails here.
Yeah, I'm trying to like steer us a little bit better, and that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to learning this is how to steer the conversations well. I guess my idea is we'll keep talking about that. But on the topic we're at, so the next part was the captions. So you keep on hearing about, podcasting is full. There's too many people. You can't even compete. What's the point of doing it? I disagree with that now. The tools that are coming out this very day are so game changing that it's sort of leveling the field between people who've been at it for a long time and beginners. So right now is a great time. With Premiere, I wanted to have something to see while you're watching the podcast. And since we didn't have video for the first 5-6 episodes, it's just like a still frame that put in there. I wanted to have the text. That is a paid thing from this place called Descript, or you just have to spend like 2-3 hours writing it up by hand, all this stuff. Premiere Pro just updated to have that a part of it. Any audio you put into your project, it will automatically start transcribing for free and just goes.
That's insane.
Then I found this great
Does
tutorial
it have
online.
pacing as well built into it?
You can, give all these settings of how many letters do you want to have per phrase, how long do you want the max for minimum phrase to be, and you can start adjusting the style. It's not going to be, every frame's a painting, but it's really nice. And obviously the quality is going to keep improving. So I did that. The first episode, it took me a long time to edit the animation with the music and the fade out and all these other things. But after I got that set up, we're going to get back to this important theme for 2024. After I systematized it, I eventually spent the time to make that into a reproducible nugget. And then it got easy. Episode 3, 4, 5, 6, bolt, go. The majority of the time spent in editing these episodes was in getting the caption set. Partially because I'm still learning the skill of if you want to slice the beginning of the episode and the end off, it kind of messes with the timing of the transcripts. And there's probably an easy way to do it. I will systematize that next time, but one thing at a time, and then enjoy actually having time to be creative. This tutorial I found online was how to make the captions animated and look cool. I like that. So it might be subtle that you didn't notice it, and that's kind of how a lot of great stuff is. But the captions come in, but they pop in. So there's a feeling of motion every time a new line appears.
Interesting. I like that.
The thing automatically gets you the captions, and then you highlight all of them and say, convert to a graphic. And then it just hard codes those as text on the screen, and then you can use whatever elaborate editing tools you have. I bought a pack of caption, animations, and most of them are really elaborate. So I was looking for the one that would be the most subtle, but still feel like there's enough motion that you get that primitive, oh crap, is a snake trying to bite me? I better pay attention to this kind of thing. And so each one
you
just
don't want it to
in.
feel like a middle schooler's PowerPoint where they just discovered transitions and every slide has something over the top.
Exactly. The guy teaching it was teaching it for doing it for gamer podcasts, where having it look as goofy as possible suits the tone of both the speaker and the game. But there was so many in it that there was something really suitable for more, mature and sophisticated topics.
Yes, sir.
So take a look at it next time and see if you notice it, and see if you feel it. You feel something from it. But doing that for each one was a bit of a manual process. So that was the longest time once I had my system running for each episode. Then we get to the hardest part. The freaking show notes.
Oh.
If nothing else, you need to have a title for each episode. You can't just say episode 1, 2, 3, 4. No one's going to care because clearly you don't care enough to make it easy for them to know what's in it. And a lot of these topics, they're timeless. We're looking on audio. We're worrying about, how to deal with burnout. All these things, someone, like 2 years from now could look back and go, oh, That's the episode I want to hear. That's what's relevant to me right now. The rest, maybe never, but that one I need to see. And the ideal is you should pay planning your podcast out well enough in advance that when you're done with it and you ask yourself, well, what was the podcast episode about for me to write up my show notes? You already know because you planned, you did it. It was in there what you planned. The first 4 or 5 or 6 episodes, no.
That was throw darts at the wall and see where they stick.
We were learning what was the right feel for us. At first, it was just conversations that flowed everywhere. I think we even had an episode where we said, you know what, it's time to cut off the discussions about philosophy and what makes people happy versus not, and just focus on actually content creation. and then after we had gotten to the idea, which was brilliant, I'm glad we can take credit for kind of reinventing fire ourselves, but having a plan of topics we want to cover each episode, we had a great idea. We weren't good at it yet. So we were going all over stuff and the notes didn't really quite match. So I actually had to go through and listen for about maybe 5 hours worth of podcast episodes, taking my notes by hand, like what the crap actually we talked about.
I'm so sorry that I made you do that.
It's the creator's dilemma, because at the same time, I learned so much from it. That we really did ask good questions and come up with decent answers. So when I was going through it, all these things, it's not making math where you know the answer and it's just the answer forever. These are skills. A lot of these are emotional skills that you have to repeat multiple times before you actually get it and actually internalize it and are able to do it. So while I was really stressed about time and wanting to get things done because I have other things that are coming up soon in my deadlines, it was really so valuable for me to go through those that I didn't want to skip that process.
Well, I'm glad that it was at least somewhat enjoyable to go down memory lane then.
Yeah. There's a couple things from there that I actually want to tell you that I learned from it. But first, I wanted to say, if you do something like this, where you're long form, make really detailed plans ahead of time, write it down. It'll save you just hours and hours of time.
That makes complete sense. And before we get into this, I have a question for you. After
Always.
going back and listening and seeing all the old topics that we talked about, what's the number one thing you want to work on from those still?
That I still need to improve now?
Not necessarily need to improve, but that you want to.
For the podcast, that's what I was saying before. The number one thing is I want to learn how to steer the conversation. So it's, it's like a shared thing where you can feel like, okay, we need to move this to have these, each segment in a podcast, it's sort of like a story that you tell, where it has to have a beginning, middle, of an end, and it has to have a direction. But at the same time, you can't just be cutting people off and making it feel like their input isn't valued or interesting. So it has to be kind of this on-the-fly, elegant way. And I think there's ways that I can improve at that I'm going to discuss with you later on. But that's the number one thing I think I would like to be better at for podcasts.
Well, now I feel selfish. I was going to say the color theory.
The color theory?
I need to use more color still, man.
Oh, the number thing we learned that you want to use? Oh, that was a great topic. Yeah, I personally learned so much from reviewing our discussion on color theory.
It's one of those things where I have to consciously try and force myself to work on it, because otherwise I will just get in my normal workflow and not even think about color.
There's so much of, we kept on coming back over and over of how to deal with burnout, dealing with indecision, and applying the 80-20 rule. And it was always the most important question we ever came up to. And it's a prime example. Even if you have been told it, doing it over and over until you actually get it right in your emotions and your plans and your work habits, that's the main thing, I think, from everything I heard.
Absolutely. Habits are great once you have them, but they are hard to form right.
I would say if you're going into, nuclear engineering school, you have to learn a new way to think. If you're going into content creation, you're training a new way to feel.
I like that. New way to feel.
Hmm. So finishing up the last part of that is the final thing was after all the show notes were ready, that was a good experience of writing small scripts. And that was something I've been saying, like script writing was very difficult for me. It's very important for me. And having small ones, get more of those small pots out, taking just here's the summary of the episode, condense that into like a nice 2-3 paragraph thing to write. That was a lot of good practice for me. And once that was done, then it was time to publish. And I think we did something similar. First of all, for just pure audio, published on Spotify. That was super easy. And from there, Spotify will actually link it to almost every other platform that I wanted to publish to anyway. I use Pocket Casts, so like, oh, at least I have to have that. And most of my friends that use Apple, I'm like, oh, I got to do that. But once you published in Spotify, you get all that for free. You just click a button, let it go. The other half was publishing on YouTube.
Have not ventured there yet. How was it?
I'm familiar with that from my drone work, and that's for me, that was easier. That's just a black box of mystery for me because I don't know why someone would ever want to look at a podcast. Like, we're recording, I did all the edits, I put in video and the graphics and stuff, purely on faith that I've been told that YouTube is actually the biggest podcasting per hour platform in the world.
That is insane to me.
I made the same thing, yeah.
The only time I ever listen to podcasts is if I'm like in the car doing something else and I'm not looking at it.
Yeah, so that's actually the next topic that I want to bring up. Like, who the heck watches a 2-hour podcast? Are you just sitting on a couch and like it's just two people sitting there and you're just staring at that for, or do you have it like on the wall while you're cooking, or is it sort of like companionship and having the faces there? You're a smart man with a lot of people.
Watch a live stream if you're trying to be friends with. I mean, don't take this personally if you're watching this. I love you. Thank you for being here. But
yes, thank you for me.
Come on. If there's that many people that want to watch us, let's just do it live at that point.
That might be part of it. Like I was watching the Aaron Rodgers Joe Rogan episode today just because I really like Aaron Rodgers, and I flipped on the video for a grand total of 60 seconds because in the middle, the guy's golden retriever comes out and starts playing, like licking everyone's face. Like, that's the only time I need to see
that. Absolutely. That is worthy. See, that's something where they just post that like 30-second clip on their Instagram to get more people to go listen to the podcast then.
Okay, so that's something I'm theorizing. I like your idea that maybe it's just streaming adjacent. When I was putting together the preparations for the last time we recorded, my brother actually asked, like, hey, is there a live stream? I'd like to watch. I'm like, oh, well, I'm touched, but also like, I never thought that would be something enjoyable to people. And I looked into it, and the new, like the full version that we purchased for Riverside, managed to like sneak around the internet and found like a really good discount code.
Nice.
It has the live streaming option, so we could do that. I'm sure there's ways I could hook it up with OBS and all these other things, but we can just do this, move on, and get back to focusing on the conversation and storytelling skills that we want to work on most.
Oh, that would be really fun, especially if we get a decent sized following. Would it let us read like their messages and stuff as they're watching along, so that way they can contribute?
Yeah, you can get some questions and feedback, and I think that'd be really cool.
Oh my god, yeah, that'd be amazing. I'd love to do that.
But I like the idea. Do all the things. Do a solo episode like you're doing. Do a shared episode like this. Do the live streaming episode. And do everything. You learn something different from each one, and the audience gets something different from each one. So you should be doing them all.
It's amazing to me. I love the idea of live content, especially when you record it and have just the published of the live there afterwards, because you're getting all the engagement of something live, and then you're getting to save that content and have it there for people who want to go back and watch it if they weren't able to make it.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost like a recording of a concert where having all the people made the energy, but you get to like have it whenever you need it.
It's I think it's a brilliant content creation tool. I haven't stepped into that world at all yet, but
Mm.
I'd like to.
But this is working out great. I'm glad we have like two heads of the Hydra. You keep on pushing things further in one direction and teach me a lot about that. And I'm going to keep dragging us a little bit further down this crazy road, and we'll see what happens down there.
Hey, I love it. It seems like both paths are great ones right now, which is
Yeah.
amazing that we both found a good adjacent path to each other.
It's like, I've seen this all the time. Like the people I enjoy spending time with the most are the people who there's a shared center. So there's an overlap that we understand each other, the why we're doing this. But what we're doing is different enough that we're actually, we're like bringing Prometheus fire from different, you know, worlds and trading them, like you get something out of it. So the thing I wanted to get into is when I was reviewing the old episodes, there's a whole lot I learned from it. And one was the big arc of going from small things to big things, realizing that was a complete total mistake and not mistake. I had to do the Irish whiskey tasting or I would never respect myself. But it was not the right time for my learning. If I was going for maximum learning per year, that was the not right choice. And then going back to small again. We had that discussion about the professor with the small pots and the one masterpiece and how the small pots is definitely the fastest way to learn. We're probably now in the best environment with our skill set to do the small pot thing. I think this is going to be the time when the quantity of things we make takes off and the rate of learning we get from it is going to just explode. And I'm really excited for that.
You know what? I think I have our next small pot idea for us already.
What do you got?
Let's come out with a trailer.
A trailer?
Just in general for, hey, you're interested in what the show's about? Here, start here. This is going to give you a good idea.
Oh, yeah, a full-on trailer for the podcast. Yes, I like that a lot. I'm slowly taking notes for that. And then the next thing that was the biggest that I learned from listening to the podcast, it's embarrassing how poor of a listener I am. And I was even worse then. But it was staring me in the face, Ryan, how much of a background in content creation you started this all off out with.
And I know a few people.
Yeah, I keep on in my mind, and that's the one I would talk about next. I have this in my mind that, Ryan, he's a whiskey expert. He went to those classes in Texas, and you would lightly mention the marketing part or the story writing class, and none of that would stick in my brain until we finally sat down and you asked you to tell you all about it then. And you're like, well, it originally started as a marketing school. So the whiskey school is kind of like its second version, and all the original stuff of understanding people and their motivations and why that matters, that's still baked into the whole process. I'm like, oh, I'm just a slow learner, aren't I?
I think no matter what you're teaching, you need to teach about people. You need to teach about if I just knew all this stuff about whiskey, I could sit in a corner and no one would ever come near me because I'd be an encyclopedia collecting dust on a bookshelf.
Mm-hmm.
If you actually have the skills to talk to people, get them interested, you're going to be so much better off. You're actually going to be able to use those skills now.
It's more effective.
One of my favorite things that Daniel, the chancellor of the school, has said a couple times, if you have someone who knows absolutely nothing about whiskey, your first instinct is going to be, let me take you by the hand. I have a whole new world to show you. You're along for the ride. It's going to be a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to overwhelm them and scare them off. Mm-hmm. Instead, if they ask a question, you answer that question and you stop. And you don't say anything and you let them ask a next question. And just, you're there holding their hand, helping guide them to what they want to find, but you're letting them still lead you to what they want.
And I feel like that's the fundamental difference, and that I finally learned. The most important thing isn't your art, your history, and all this encyclopedia knowledge. The most fundamental, most important thing is, where is that person at? And what is relevant to them? And that, once I started learning about that, became really exciting to sit down and no, this person doesn't know anything about whiskey, but they're kind of interested in this. They have a little bit of curiosity in this. And you go, oh, that's the edge that connects. Well, here's that piece. And I'm not going to give you this thing 10 doors down that doesn't matter to you yet. That shared mattering is the exciting stuff. That's when their eyes light up. Go like, oh, so it'll get me drunk, right? Like, well, that's really, really basic, but you're excited about that. So that's the right step. And you're having a good time.
Absolutely. I mean, there was one guy who was just excited and amazed to learn that Scotch is just whiskey made in Scotland.
Yeah.
Like, to me, at this point, it's like breathing. Yeah, of course, Scotch is whiskey. But I have to remember I've drank more whiskey than most people will in their lifetime, and
Mm.
have probably forgotten more about whiskey than a lot of people will ever know. So it's not that obvious to everyone, and if they're excited to learn this, I'm excited to help you.
Yeah. And that
I don't want to ruin that enthusiasm. I want to just be here, help you.
the enthusiasm is everything. And if we weren't paying attention to how they're feeling and just pay attention to like what is the maximum way to learn whiskey, we would miss all of those little steps. Like, what if you let them all the way to the level of knowledge you have right now and missed all the thousands of parts of the, oh, that's really cool. Oh, that's cool too. Like, I would hate to skip those. That's a fun part.
To me, the most fun is once you get someone and you've helped hold their hand to the point where they are now excited for some of the things you're excited about. Oh my god, that's fun.
Hmm.
Like, I'll have a bottle of whiskey that's they did something really weird to it. No one's doing this. Why is no one doing this? Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? I don't know. But I have someone to share that with now. Versus if I
Yeah.
overwhelmed you and scared you off, I'm enjoying this by myself in my dark apartment. That's nowhere near as fun.
100%. 100%. So what I want to get into for our last segment is I kind of want to like reflect a little bit on the different starting skills that you, I, and other people come into this. I've kind of grappled with this a lot because, I'm probably very on the lower end of starting skills, which, makes me good for this podcast project of explaining all the things you could learn. There's a lot of people in the classes I take where, say they've been shooting photography for 10 years and now they're just adding the other skills. Or, they're like a published novelist and now they're adding other skills. And on top of the fact that that's a great starting point, they don't have to learn that one. These things kind of leak into the other categories. So if you're a master like novelist, you're going to actually have a fair amount of skill of photography just from like the way you think about feelings and emotions and connections more than someone who had nothing at all. So I kind of always felt behind the wheel. There was actually a guy today and he's like getting interviewed by this, editing software because he's this talented guy who's making tons of money. And they're like, la, la, la. 4 months ago, I was in the class with him. And, the way he's just like, whoo, completely leaving me in the dust because he started with 15 years of editing films for Hollywood. He's not starting at zero, you know?
Yeah, that makes a difference.
So I don't think it's, I don't think I even have the right words for this, that we're like zero or someone's better. But I think it's important to actually take a second for all of us and think about what is the actual baseline skills you have and what's the baseline skills of the people that you're comparing yourself against. I think it'll give you a little bit more patience for yourself and a lot more credit for what you came along with. So starting with you, the things I would know is one, before you bought a microphone, before you launched your podcast, first of all, Ryan had been a bar worker. Thousands of hours of listening to people's stories, telling stories back to them. That's That's an amazing education right there already. And second, the whiskey sommelier school that you went to for 4 degrees also trains you on story writing, marketing, and probably a whole bunch of other things that you can tell us all about. Go ahead, just before you got your first microphone, what were all the background that taught you and skills you had built up that would pay off in
Oh,
content creation?
goodness. Uh, it's funny. I'll still realize, oh, this one thing that I did 6 years ago, I'm using those same lessons in a way I never would have thought, and I didn't even realize it.
Hmm.
It's amazing how your past experiences influence everything you do. But
Hmm.
you're absolutely right. Bartending has been a huge one. I've realized I'm going to turn 26 next month, and I already have over a decade of experience working in customer service,
Hmm.
which makes me a little depressed to say that out loud. But having to spend that much time working with people, trying to make them and keep them happy, it absolutely taught me a lot. Man, if you saw me back before I had any of that experience, I was, what's the word I'm looking for? My socialization skills were not there. Let's just say that. I was
Hmm.
not going to be the kid who was at a crowded lunch table in high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nowadays, I can have a full bar sitting in front of me and I can keep them all entertained with a story while I'm making them a drink.
Yeah.
It's been a long road, but I'm so grateful for the lessons I learned on it.
I like
Uh,
this doubly because it's something that on the outside it doesn't seem like an education, but was. And actually, the more you think about it, there's more education in there, and there may be more things that other people who are starting this journey off. Maybe it wasn't bartending. Maybe it was something else they've worked on or have done, or just experience that they've had that would make them feel intimidating. But if they actually sat down and thought about it, would realize how much of a head start they already have.
so here's a weird example for you.
Hmm.
I spent just under 5 years working at a Home Depot.
Okay. How could this
It
connect?
taught me such good critical thinking and outside the box thinking. You would not believe the things people came to me trying to solve their problems. And I know what's in the store at that point. I've spent a couple years in that store.
Hmm.
I know what I have to work with. How can I recommend something to you to make it work?
Okay, so I'm following that part. How would those sorts of critical thinking skills help you in content creation?
Well, it's the same thing. If you know what tools you have to work with, you're going to start thinking of them rather than just using this for what it's labeled for, how can I change that for a different thing, shoehorn it in, and make it work?
Hmm. I I definitely like the idea of shoehorning things in. I see that in a lot of places in editing, script writing, ridiculous transitions from one topic to another, but you make the audience feel that they're connected because you just said it with such conviction.
Confidence is another thing I had to learn there because I was,
Mm.
see, 16 years old, I think, when I started working at Home Depot. And when someone comes up to you asking for advice on how to build a deck and you're 16 years old, trying to act confident and be able to say, yeah, no, you need this, this, and this. And eventually you get good enough at being confident to where they believe you and buy it. It's amazing how much confidence will do. But going back to just making things work, I couldn't tell you which effect it was, but there's one effect I used in Shackleton and I used it in a later episode. And I had to
Mm.
like slow it down, change the pitch of it, just make it sound completely different, but it's the same basic effect.
Hmm. Okay. I
I
like
think it
that.
was like the steam whistle, and then I sped it up, made it slightly higher pitch. Think I've lowered. No, I made the volume slowly change the pitch and the volume so it sounded like the train was moving by you. Had to do a lot of work, but I made one effect into another thing entirely.
Mm-hmm. You want to tell us a little bit more about the different skills you got from your whiskey training school?
Whiskey training, that is a whole lot of skills packed into 3-day long lessons. Writing, again, improv is a big one down there. I remember for my level 1,
Improv.
they said, all right, here's a hat with different topics of whiskey on it. We know you know what these topics are about. You're going to pull one out, and you have to just stand up in front of the class and just talk about that subject for a minute.
Mm.
Here's the fun part. It doesn't have to be true at all. You can make up whatever the fuck you want. Oh my god, the first one I did so bad at. And I remember there was a guy in my class, I'm friends with him still, named Richard, and he did the best job I ever out of anyone in the class. And that was, first of all, instead of just listing off facts about our topic like a lot of us did, he actually told a story. The story was not at all true, and it was funny. I still remember it was on peat moss was his topic. And so he starts off very somber and slow, and like the rest of us talking about how, oh, yep, peat moss, it's these different layers of biological substances that slowly get compressed down and turn into this moss. They burn it for smoke wood. And this one time, little Pete fell into the bog, and he tastes delicious, but that's where it got its name from. Oh my gosh. So good.
And when you know the story, it makes that even more hilarious.
Oh, for just coming up with that on the spot, it was amazing. And I can't tell you how many times I've thought of that story. He probably hasn't thought about it once since that day.
Mm-hmm.
That's how powerful it was to me of, this is what I want to get to.
Storytelling is a magical thing. Any other different skills? I think we got another maybe like 5 minutes before we have to switch to the next topic.
I mean, I could go on for longer than I should on what I learned there, and just fantastic experience. Cannot recommend it highly enough. If you ever find yourself down there, let me know.
Yeah, this has definitely made me think that that's a experience I want to have on my list for all of those other skill sets you built up. It really gave you, in my opinion, like a kind of holistic base of content creation skills. And now you're learning like the formal details of to do it. But you already have kind of like those seeds planted that, it's kind of cooking in you the whole time.
Oh, so, here's one more thing before we move on. One of the other things they talk about a lot there is pattern recognition for tasting things, smelling things.
Yes.
How, if you think about it, you've been tasting and smelling things every second of every day for your entire life. You should be very good at it. But how much were you actually paying attention to and thinking about it while you were tasting, while you were smelling, and recognizing it? Being able to consciously pay attention to it makes a huge difference.
Yes.
I say that extends over to content creation. How much of your life have you spent watching movies, playing video games, listening to music, listening to podcasts, anything with a story, anything that's content? Pay attention to it. It's got you hooked for a reason. You can learn from it.
That was one of the lines from that Stephen King writing book that I was so impressed with, where he says, the best written books, you won't notice any of the techniques because you'll be so engrossed in the story and the experience. And that's actually the last thing I was going to end up with was we also have a lifetime of all the art we've seen and all the movies we've seen. And it's just kind of weird split because on one hand, you talk about that with tasting. Once you start paying attention to it, then you start noticing it, and then you start learning way faster than when you were just drinking. I had the same experience with the visual stuff. When I first took that, 14-day filmmaker class, and they started talking about composition and looking at like the colors and the shapes. And then when I had that drone course and we had to look at clouds to know whether or not they were going to kill the drone or not, you start paying attention to that so much. You're like, wow, I never realized how beautiful there are and how many different types there are. Suddenly, not only just really enjoying it more, but also the learning just ramped up like crazy. I kind of wonder. We've had several times that referenced, the A-team shows that you've watched giving you a boost in your skills nowadays. But what do you think like the difference is in how much you learn when you're just cruising, enjoying versus how rapidly you learn now when you understand these concepts about storytelling, making camera movements. You've had those seeds planted and then watched the movie.
I'm going to say it's important to have both. First of all, I think you should absolutely just watch something without giving it a second thought, and you should enjoy that part of your life. But as
Mm,
soon as you have those seeds planted, go back to those things that you loved first
yeah.
and find out why you loved them.
Mm,
Because you were
why you love them.
subconsciously drawn to it. Once you have those seeds planted, you can't put those back in Pandora's box. You're going to be looking for those in everything, and you're going to purposely find bits of media that fit what you think is good, and they won't necessarily be as good as what you were drawn to before you knew you should be drawn to it.
I like that. There was a reason why you liked these, but now you can have a deeper understanding of what it was you liked. Partially, I enjoy that more, and then also I have a better understanding of what things I want to put into the creations that I'm doing next.
To put it another way, imagine if you were looking at a museum and there's one of each different type of art style. And I know you, Ethan, were standing in front of the Baroque and you were just
Yeah.
staring at it, smiling, and you had no idea why you liked it, but you did.
Mm,
And now, years later, you can go back and you can go straight to that one. You can look at it and go, yep, I know why I like this. This brush style is great. The contrast is great. The light and the shadow, the
mm.
emotions from it. This is why I love it.
It's a pretty powerful thing to have. One other angle to this that I want to hit. A lot of movies became really boring to me, where that's what we talked about, where I would every year I'd have to drink more in order to watch a film and still have it be enjoyable because I'd have to just dumb myself down to the point where you see where I'm going with it. This level of like analyzing it now and being able to pick up on why I liked all the things, there's so much more for my brain to do while I'm watching the film. That a same movie that maybe would have bored me is so much more interesting now. I went to see The Beekeeper this past weekend, and the
How
good
was it?
parts were fucking amazing. But the bad parts were equally so bad that I could not even believe those people were in the same room and there wasn't like a bar fight. But instead of just being kind of like, that was a media movie, I was able to see why the good parts were good, why the bad parts were bad. So both of them became more enjoyable than they would have been if I hadn't had any of this skill training.
So, this is a hard question. What was your favorite movie before we started talking about all this?
Oh, Lord. That would have to be Fight Club.
Have you watched it since?
No, I haven't. And man, every time you do this, Ryan, it's brilliant and absurd that I haven't made the connection yet and just smack me in the face with like, thank you. Fuck yeah, I'm gonna watch Fight Club again.
So, I want you to watch it twice. The first time, I want you just to watch it. The second time, I want you to pay attention to everything you were looking for, but also if you had to put it into an art style, see if it would line up with Baroque, because I'm curious.
Oh, I can tell you immediately, yes. Like
I
I
thought it
can
might.
picture the scenes in my mind, and it's all dark and light, contrasting like crazy, and everything's super motion and dynamic, and it's all about. The problem with you is you're not letting your emotions be intense.
Yeah, that actually fits pretty well.
Yeah, I don't
It's
need to
amazing.
rewatch
We
things
have
to
a
know if it's
type,
broken
don't
or not.
we?
Yes, I definitely have a type.
We
So,
all do.
question for you: what's your favorite movie?
Now or before we start talking about this?
I will take either answer.
I've got a couple. I'm going to say my favorite recent movie was The Gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
Just amazing. It's one of the first movies within the last, I don't know, at least 5 years where I couldn't tell you what was going to happen before it happened.
That is a good feeling.
And it wasn't like jump scares. It wasn't just cheap shoehorning something in. It was well thought out, well written, funny, great cast, beautifully shot. I was so impressed by it. And I was so close to doing what I would tell myself to do now, where I was like, oh, I love this. I need to find more like it. Rather than trying to figure out why I liked it so much, I went
Yeah.
and found more by the same director.
Mm. So, could we ask you to do this? Ask you to do the same thing and watch it again and see what it's new things you pick up on.
Oh, I've seen it like 8 times this year already.
Okay, so we're already set. Okay, well, we'll pick
Yep.
up. We'll think of another one. I'd like the idea of having a little exercise.
I'll
So
find something I haven't seen in a while.
yeah, it's been working really good to have these kind of exercises. I'll come back to in a second. I want to like wrap up the last topic. So for my baseline skills, like most of my time has been spent doing science. So nuclear engineering, artificial intelligence, chemistry, this kind of stuff. Yeah, none of that transfers over. Zero. And a lot of my
Darn,
life
you're being
actually
too hard.
I could actually feel it frustrating me that this stuff doesn't apply for anything outside of that room. It's good for making a machine, it's good for making money, but you would see that in people's lives where they had terrible family lives, terrible marriages, terrible relationships, and terrible friendships because it doesn't build any other skills in life. But the first profession I ever had, I studied classical music. That's where I got my Baroque education. And I'm so lucky I had that experience. I had someone give me like the best advice I ever had. And they said, if there's something that you like and something you love, it was something like, if you could wait, do the dangerous thing first. Because if you don't do the dangerous thing first, you'll never do it. And music is very dangerous. You're not going to have money. It's really easy to starve. You're like, okay, well, if it's going to be hard to do it, I stopped all my computer science classes and I immediately jumped into the music department. It's the only F I've ever gotten because I just flat out stopped going to my science classes because I was so in love. Like I went into just a beginner's class on music and it was just so in love. I could not tolerate spending any time on anything else. Just the waste on that was so tragic. But you can see why I feel so relieved to be back into working on creative work now. But I got that. Then the next big thing was when I started to get into travel. That experience that I use in my ad for the Irish whiskey tasting about how my friends took me to, I was feeling really disconnected from my culture. And then for St. Patrick's Day, when it's one day I get to breathe, they took me to a Filipino bar. And I never had the time or money to really like risk on travel. And traveling alone sounded terrible. It even sounded like a defeat. It's the first time you do these should be the best time, which means you should do it with your close friends. And I didn't have any people in my life who wanted to do it. But because of the experience, like, this is just too much. I'm going to do this now. And that just going to Irish bars taught me so much about how to listen to people, what goes into like good human connection, good storytelling. I could just have an entire episode talking about the lessons I got from that. Wrapped on top of that is the lessons of solo travel, where instead of being the whole time I'm talking with my friend who I've known a long time and we're fine, every single night, every single hour of every day was talking to total strangers, hearing their stories, learning how to get people to open up and share what's important to them.
Learning
And
how to
that
be a bartender.
kind of, like I was on the other side of the fence, but there's some similarities in between that.
It's absolutely an overlap, and I'll be honest, that's the part that's going to make you more money than making a good drink.
The buying drinks for myself, I definitely put a hole in my pocket.
No, the being able to talk to people, get them engaged, and want to tell you their story. That will make you money if you were bartending. You could just do nothing but pour beer that's
Oh,
half foam, and you'd make good money still.
that's a good point. Yeah, yeah. So that was like one big thing that helped a lot. And the final thing is so a really interesting train of events. I've always felt, through all my science and math classes, because, I went to college 3 times for 3 different science degrees, that like you're with your friend and you like each other and you have a lot in common. This is a great person. But the conversation's just like, it could be more. And I remember thinking, this used to be an art. Like conversation was a skill, an art, like painting that people would train and master in their whole life, make their conversations better so that when they're talking to their friend when they're 60, it's even more funny and more entertaining and deep and insightful than when they were 20. And I started looking online, like, how do you have good conversations? How do you learn to like be better at that? And there was nothing, and I couldn't find it. Little do I know that it actually existed at that time, but I just couldn't find it. Later, because of my friend Sean that I met through my trip to Ireland, he was mocking the very concept of it by sending me videos of a guy showing clips of James Bond talk and explaining why it was so gripping, compelling, and interesting. And that channel ended up becoming one of the most important influences of the next 3 years of my life.
What
The
was
guy
that
who does
channel,
it.
if you don't mind me asking?
So the channel, it's called Charisma on Command.
I think you've talked about that before, haven't you?
Yeah, the reason why it's really interesting is because this, I think we could take a pass. I've already got a decent baseline skill of talking to people from the Ireland experiences. The guy got a degree in philosophy and spends all his time thinking about morality. The whole Charisma and Command YouTube channel and that, business that he made money off of only came as like a side offshoot of, well, I really want to have better conversations and I want to like, have better dating and stuff. And he figured that out for himself. And then he started teaching that to other people. But that was just one small, pebble in the giant, mountain of, I understand how people work and how they think. And so he spends a lot of time on psychology, applied psychology, philosophy, um, things like that. So from there, I found his main channel, which isn't as popular because he's just talking about this deep stuff that isn't really interesting to most people. But so much of that has paid off for this content creation thing. So when you get into, well, I want to write a story. Well, the first thing is, how does the audience feel? What's going to be relevant to them? What are they going to care about? For advertising, same questions. And everything that he's been discussing for this, you got to really understand yourself. And to do that, you have to understand how most people work. So this is what other people might be feeling. If that resonates with you, that's you. If it doesn't, then But you also know how other people work. And so you can understand, connect with them. Man, it was like Mr. Miyagi thing where I didn't know this was training that skill. But now that I'm getting to like, oh my gosh, like freaking Charlie Hoopert in his freaking class taught me so much on this. While it was just trying to make me be a more happy, content person, he's also like built some outward facing skills. Also, he, just really likes helping people out and cares about like, this worked good for me, so I want you to know everything about it. He spends a lot of time talking about the nuts and bolts of how he built his business. So, I've been clamoring for starting some sort of business for a while. I just didn't have an idea to do because all of this, like, this sounds great. I love this idea of, entrepreneurship, and I think I've learned a lot of fundamentals of marketing and advertising and things like that from just listening to his podcast for all these years. But I didn't have anything to apply to until you did your podcast. I started getting hooked on that topic. Then I got into the drones, and now, like, this, I realized it's the product that I've been waiting for. This is the creation I want to make. This is the business that I wanted.
I am thrilled to hear you say that, because I think we've got a great idea and a great thing going here.
I'm excited about it. So
I am a little confused that you don't think you've got any relevant experience from your science teaching and everything. I would be shocked to hear you didn't have any overlap. Now,
I haven't
do you
really
think that there is? No. Is there? Probably.
that we'll have to look into more. I haven't really brought it up, but actually I see a lot of ways that it's actually made this harder for me. I'm going to save that for another day to bring that up. That's a pretty big enchilada.
I have one question that might help you make this a little easier. Did you have to do any writing for your science, like any science papers that were just dry, horrible?
Not really. They're, not really. So
Okay.
That's a good question, though.
Darn, I was going to say in my level 1 class, there was 2 different guys. One is a wine sommelier. The other was an engineer, just fresh out of engineering school. And we got a writing assignment. Who do you think did better on it?
Well, I think you're leading me to say the engineer.
That's right. The wine sommelier was using so much flowery language and just adding bullshit into it that didn't need to be there, that was distracting, to the point where the writing teacher, Maddox, told him to stop reading about
Scary
3 different
Maddox.
times. The engineer, he had him read it 3 times to the class because it was short, succinct, and yet you could picture everything perfectly.
It did teach me to get to the fucking point.
It was the most frustrating thing of, I see how that's good, I have no idea how the fuck to do it.
Yeah. He's the level of skill that he knows how to do it, but not to the level of, master where he can easily explain it. He probably can't see it in himself.
He is the most interesting and strange person I've ever met, and I love him for it. This is the same guy, I'm pretty sure I told you, that got scurvy.
Yep. Eat your oranges, everybody.
Yep. Just insane individual. But my God, once you see it, you absolutely see it everywhere.
Yeah. All right. So these are a couple of things that I'd love to come back to next week. To wrap this up, the last little bit is, I saw, going through our past episode, some things that we learned from, and then I saw some things that just felt really great. And the most charged, where we would actually do an exercise. There was a couple times where, like, you would tell a story or I would read something and the other one would kind of analyze it. And then we discussed, what could be better, what we liked about it and why. And then we had our color theory discussion where, we weren't critiquing each other, but we were really just bringing something and sitting down together live, discussing like what works, houses, and kind of learning on the fly. That, it was full of energy. And also, it's so relevant. 100%. We're talking about, like, how do we do this? Like, what's a better way to do this? And maybe most importantly, getting really tied to the core value of storytelling. I think that's something that you care a lot about. I care a lot about. And maybe that's what we're going to start leaning a little bit more heavy focused on this year. I'd like us to start doing more of those sort of things in the future.
Hey, I'm all for it. You got your homework. You're gonna watch Fight Club. What's mine?
Exactly. We'll talk about that offline, but we'll figure a movie or something, and we'll come up with something. And then
Sounds
finally,
good.
we're also slowly starting to get guests to have on. That'll be a new experience for us to talk to strangers, figure out how like we connect all the things together. But I'm looking forward to that too. So we got some new life that we're breathing into this already.
Hey, only going up and all sorts of new things to try out.
All right. So as all, we should end the question. I got a question. Do you have a question you'd like to ask the audience?
Oh, give me a second to think of one. You ask yours first.
Okay, so we'll try and end with this. But do you watch podcasts with video? If so, can you tell me why? What about it? Do you like it? When do you watch it? How much are you actually looking at it? I know this is a big deal. I'd like to learn more about it. And I'm sure I could find like some long video SSA to tell me, but it'd be more educational to hear about it from actual people that we connect with.
All right, so I'm going to build off of that. I'm sure you've seen, and everyone who's watching this will have seen, that Apple's come out with their Vision Pro or whatever, the augmented reality. Are people going to start watching more podcasts on that where they can just walk around with it and have it up in front of them while they're doing the dishes or something? Do you think that's going to make it spike even more?
Oh, I could totally see that. Because because it's positional. So I could just say, hey, I like to have these guys just hanging out in my room. You can designate it. Here's my kitchen. Here's my table. You're just hanging out on the couch over there. So I can do this, look over, like, yeah. That actually feels like a lot more natural and a lot more effective than having a screen.
I mean, once we're getting really good at this, predicting trends like that is going to be the next logical step for us, right?
Yes. And this is the underdog skill. If something new came out and you do it today, you are already the most experienced person in the world at it because no one else has had it. Love it. Love it. All right, Ryan.
So let us know if you're using the Apple Vision, whatever it's called, to watch this.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, let's end with that. Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Cheers.